Hi, this is Heather Langenkamp from A Nightmare on Elm Street, and you're listening to WithoutYourHead.com.
Welcome to the Station of Decapitation Without Your Head. I am Nasty Neal.
And I am Annabelle Lecter.
Yes, and we are joined by a very special guest here for May. It's Hellraiser month, and we have Nicholas Vince, who is also the Chatterer from Hellraiser. He's also a comic book writer. He's a published author, and he is a man who has a very well-trimmed goatee.
Hi, everybody. That's the first time my goatee has been used as part of an introduction. I love that. I took a long
It
time.
is very nice.
I took a lot of time with it yesterday because I knew I was going out in public.
Oh, I thought you meant for us. I was very proud.
Well, I can't see you. You may be able to see me. But...
Yeah. Now, we do want to talk here a little bit about Chatterer. And,
okay.
When actually was the first time you heard the name Chatterer?
Oh, that's a very good question. When I saw the movie... Well, no, it was during the filming.
Mm-hmm.
But the I think I don't have any call sheets. I believe somebody may still have some call sheets around from when we made Hellraiser. And then he was known as Chatterer when we were on set, I believe, from as far as I remember. Because, of course, you get the call sheets and it shows your character name.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one call sheet where I was down twice because when I first went to meet Bob Keane at Image Animation to get the first makeup, the first head cast done, meet everybody. I was introduced to Bob Keane and he immediately said, "Oh, you're the poor bastard." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, because you're not going to be able to see much." Which is typical British understatement. So I was, he'd referred to me as poor bastard. And there was one call sheet, I remember, which called for both Chatterer and poor bastard for the same day. I was trying to work out if I could wing it, that I could get paid twice. But no, that didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a nickname. I think Doug must have been called Pinhead fairly quickly, and Butterball. And basically these names came out of Image Animation, as far as I remember. Came out of the guys who did the makeup. So, yeah, that's where that came from.
Mm-hmm.
How much time would it take you to get into this costume? It's so intense.
It is very intense, actually. I mean, it's actually a very simple, practical makeup because it wasn't stuck to my skin like it was for Skin Frank, for Doug as Pinhead, for Grace on the first movie as the female Cenobites. They were in for a lot longer. So actually getting me into makeup and the costume on the first movie was probably about an hour, and the process involved putting a bald cap over my hair. I had hair in those days, and then painting blood on that. Then putting the teeth in because the teeth sat on dentures that were attached to my teeth, so I could do the actual chattering. Then they put the mask on, which is a one piece with a slit down the back. And then they glued bits of condom to between the plastic teeth that you see and the mask to represent gums and to make sure that when I moved the teeth, the lips of the Chatterer moved. So it all looked as if it was, it was real. And then they squirted KY jelly into my mouth. Do you have KY jelly?
Yes.
Yeah. I guess from Annabelle's deliciously dirty laugh, you must have. So
at least get it flavored.
Not in those days.
She can hook you up with some sites.
Yeah.
It's a mail order now. You'll be all set.
Yeah. So, in terms of, apart from the fact I could hardly hear, speak, or see when I couldn't really speak at all when I was wearing that, actually getting it in, that wasn't too bad.
But how about taking it off?
Again, not so bad. Because because it wasn't attached to my skin. When we did the when we did Kinski, that was 5 hours of makeup.
Yeah.
And at least an hour and a half, Kinski from Nightbreed,
Yeah.
and at least an hour and a half to actually take it off. So, yeah, that was a lot more complex.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a lot of weight on your head with that Kinski?
That's a really good question. I think because it is all solid, all the... Yeah, I don't think it was. I think it was one of my concerns, Annabelle, when I first saw the makeup. Of course, it was the second version of the makeup. It wasn't the one that I'd originally was expecting to wear when we did the original casts for Nightbreed, because the head cast for it. Because in the book, the character is Jackie, who's with Peloquin, who meets Boone in Midian, and Jackie has two faces in one, but it just didn't work as a makeup when they started with the camera on it. So they decided to change it quite late to Kinski. So my memory is, obviously I was conscious of it. I mean, I suppose if you sellotaped a sponge to your chin and another one to your forehead, another couple of bath sponges to your forehead, you get a similar effect as wearing the Kinski makeup. But then, of course, it had a wig on it as well. So, yeah, it wasn't anything too bad.
Mm-hmm.
It must have been such a huge difference. Obviously, because you had speaking role, it was your face. People could see your eyes. So how was that transfer from being kind of a guy, it wasn't, I love Chatterer, but it was not, you're just a guy that is a monster.
Yeah.
And then you're a real,
and then
speaking and breathing and...
Speaking, breathing, yes. Somebody who's got a history, as Clive revealed in the Nightbreed Chronicles. Yeah, I mean, as an actor, that was completely different. It has a completely different feeling. I really like Kinski because, as you say, he's not so much a monster. He's monstrous. Mm-hmm. But as I wrote about in my book of short stories, What Monsters Do, it is not our flesh, but our acts which make us monsters. The thing about Kinski is he looks monstrous, and he's kind of a wannabe. He wants to be a bad guy, but he really isn't. Peloquin, he's a bad guy.
Yeah.
You do not want to mess with Peloquin. But Kinski, he comes across really move or slit your throat. Yeah. But soon says, hold on, no, I didn't sign up for breaking the law. No, yeah, I think we better get this guy out of here. Run while you still got legs. So, yeah, completely different feeling and a lot more fun. And I could just see what was going on. I could actually see. I think that was, from my personal perspective as well, the great thing was I actually got to see the mechanics of making a movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas
I'm sorry, you mentioned the history, that Kinski had a history. Mm-hmm. Have you ever thought about the backstory of Chatterer and how he actually became to be Chatterer?
Yes, I have. In fact, when the second movie came out, I published a short story. I didn't publish it. The editor and the publisher published it. A magazine called Fear in the UK. They published this short story called Look, See, which was my version of the history of the Chatterer. in which he is not a boy. And then basically I just say, they lied. That's not what the backstory is. I have actually written another story, but of course the difficulty is, which actually explains why somebody who looks like a boy ended up as a chatterer. I mean, I think let's be honest, I'm an actor. I read the script of Hellbound and I thought, what do you mean I get killed? What do you mean I turn into a boy? What do you mean you don't get to see me? I want to be in movies. So, I've written another one as well, but that's all to do with rights for Dimension and whether or not it'll ever see the light of day. I don't, but I know in my own mind that there is another story, because I think it is, as I say, when I first read it, actor, wanted to see face on screen. But over the years, I find the idea of a boy who grows up in hell, because he's unlike everyone else, who's obviously more or less a straight transformation. Captain Spencer, but very different. It's Doug, becomes Pinhead, etc. The idea of a boy who grows up in hell, what that must be like, that I do think is a very fascinating idea.
Yeah. I'd be really interested in reading that, your backstory for Chatterer. So.
Yeah, I would be very interested in people reading it as well. But there are some steps to be taken, and doing the rights to Chatterer and the backstory. It's all to do with Dimension films. It's not that they're being bad guys at all. It's just we need to make find the right people and get the right people to give the permission, etc., and find out the best place to put it. Because I can hardly regard it as fan fiction. But we'll see. I mean, at the end of the day, I could just. Well, I don't know. We'll have to see about the rights.
Yeah. Was it ever explained to you why he was a boy in the end of the second one, or do you think it was just
no.
something people could think about then?
No, not at all. I think it was just a really cool idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in the first movie, when Chatterer's death, the original script called for Chatterer to be dressed in the bride's gown that Frank and Julia make love on in the flashback sequence. And I did ask Clive why. He said, it looked really interesting. Which is why you see Chatterer with that bridal veil on when he steps through the door, which suddenly lifts off, which is obviously done as a reverse shot. They ran the film backwards for that. But the original, as I say, in the original script, he's actually in the full bridal gown at the dress. He's managed to find it in cross-dress. So I love the fact that Chatterer is a cross-dresser.
Yeah. Was there a lot that was not filmed that was in the script? Either maybe just budgetary reasons or anything like that.
Not on Hellraiser that I'm aware of. Definitely on Hellbound. I remember the opening of Hellbound. I haven't read the script for a long time, but my memory is that you follow Captain Spencer through a marketplace and see him get in the box and ending up in the Nissen hut or wherever it is. He eventually opens the box in Hellbound, but that was all cut. And if you look at the movie, if you didn't know it was there, you don't miss it. The classic, the bits that really were cut were the bits underneath the sanatorium, Dr. Chenard's sanatorium, or hospital or whatever, where Chatterer and Pinhead and the female Cenobite appear. These famous photographs of the guys wearing surgical masks, etc. There was a sequence where, after I'd had the eyes revealed and transformed from Chatterer 1 into Chatterer 2, those sequences were filmed. I definitely filmed running down a corridor and chasing Kirsty. But the whole thing, I think, I read online somewhere the other day, actually, that Doug has said that the practical effects, makeup effects, didn't work the day on which they came to film, and it just didn't get done, basically.
Mm-hmm. No, what was the difference between the first one and the second one, with Clive Barker being the director of the first one but not the second one?
Oh, and having Tony Randall directing. I think the Clive is extraordinary. You can't. There's nobody else like Clive. So it was a very different style. It was a very different experience, I think. I mean, but then there's also so many other things were different as well. I mean, when we made Hellraiser, we made it up in Cricklewood at a very small film studio called the Production Village. By the time we got to Hellbound, we were at Pinewood on a big soundstage to do this stuff. In a big proper aircraft hangar style studio at Pinewood. So there were all the practical differences as well. It was a lot of the same people, particularly from Image Animation. But obviously Barbie came on board rather than Grace Kirby. And with Tony, it was a very different style. He knew what he wanted. But I'd been friends with Clive, 2-3 years before we'd made Hellraiser. Okay. So I was making a movie with my mate Clive as the director, whereas Hellbound is making a movie with this guy from Hollywood called Tony Randall.
Yeah.
Of course, when I first heard the name, I looked at Clive and I said, Tony Randall, you mean the guy from the TV series The Odd Couple?
Uh-huh.
I was like, no, not that one.
That would have been interesting.
Can you imagine what kind of Hellraiser that would be? I know.
Wow. I kind of want to see that now.
Yeah, it was great. Well, Tony Randall, made a movie called The Seven Faces of Dr. Wu.
That sounds very familiar.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
And he plays all these different versions of
He plays all the different, yes. And when I was at Monster Palooza, at the beginning, there was these guys do makeup. Monster Palooza is all about the makeup. It's done in Hollywood so that they can get people from all the big Hollywood makeup studios and FX studios there. And somebody had done a tribute to that movie. It's one of those movies I caught it on a Sunday afternoon. I think it's absolutely fascinating. And I think Tony Randall did an amazing job. The actor Tony Randall did an amazing job on that movie. You can't get it on DVD over here. I'd love to see it again. So yeah, that was my initial reaction. Tony was a nice guy. I did as I was told as an actor, as best as I could. That's kind of what filming's about.
Yeah, in a way, that was more like a job in a way than.
Yes. Yeah. And I think there's a different sensation to it, and you kind of feel more confident, and you're doing something you've done before. And as I say, George Clooney has spoken about this. When you're making a movie, when you're doing any job, if you're doing theatre and you're doing a show, to be honest, it's as much about the people that you're working with as the work yourself in many ways, unless you're playing Hamlet. I guess that's a lot different. But when you're doing a job, one of the things you really hope to get out of it is meet some really cool and interesting people.
Yeah.
As well as do some some very, very good work. So at the time, that's a lot of what the experience of working on a show, working on a movie is. It's about the theatre, particularly on working on a movie, it's working with the film crew and the rest of the cast. When you're doing theatre, it's obviously all that plus the audiences as well.
Do you feel like that's a universal experience of being in film or acting, that it is more about the community and the people you meet and the experiences you share together and where you go on as friends and contacts? Do you feel that there are people that don't appreciate that?
I don't know that I would have. That's interesting. I think it's very difficult. I did a job last year and the beginning of this year. I made a very good friend out of it, funny enough, is who I'm going out with dinner tonight, a guy called Dawson James, who's just done a very good Kickstarter for a thing called HUD. And I'm looking forward to learning all about his filming. I think it's the same in all life, Annabelle, because I worked in an office for 16 years, and it's always, at the end of the day, it's always about the people. I think anything, life generally, it's a very good, it's a very good statement to think about. It's always about the people, unless you're a psychopath, apparently.
I was thinking the very same thing.
I was really annoyed I missed it. We only, there was a 2-hour documentary on psychopaths last night on British television, which I'm hoping to
seek that out.
What is it? Because this is a subject that I'm very drawn to. It's very interesting to me.
Yeah. And psychopath, and we saw a bit of it, but it was way too far into trying to get, and I was very tired when I got back last night. I think it's always about the people and getting a special bunch of people to create something special. You need to have special people to do it. I did a breakfast meeting. Once a month, there's a thing called the London Screenwriters Festival, and once a month they organise a breakfast club where they bring in directors and producers, etc., to talk about the process of creating movies. And I attended one earlier in the month, which was all about horror movies. And there was one producer there, and she said, and I can't remember the lady's name at the moment, but I can find that out for you later. But she said basically there are 3 things that you need to get right if you're making any movie. Number 1 is the script. Number 2 is the cast. And number 3 is the sound. And she said, it's, when you look at a movie, it's about the actors. Number 2, you've got to have a superb story. You've got to have a really great script. But you've also got to have the talent in front of the camera. Obviously, you need the talent behind the camera. And she was not saying, I was not saying, or trying to discount the importance of the camera crew or anything else. And I think particularly in Hellraiser, you're talking about some extraordinarily talented people who put together those makeups. Jeff Portas, Little John Cormacan, to name but 2, Cliff Wallace. And all the rest of that crew, Simon Sace, etc., etc. Without them, you would not have had the movie that you see on the screen in front of you. So I think, at the end, whether there are people who don't understand that, who just try and ignore that and step all over people, I don't think they last very long, in the business. You've got to get, because what George Clooney was saying is that when you're casting a movie, you try and weigh up the person's talent, but you also ask the question, well, what are they going to be like to work with?
Yeah.
Okay, they may be crazy, but God, they're enormously talented. I can probably do this for 6 weeks of a shoot. I can probably work with them. I don't have to see them again at the end of the shoot.
And then there's always good stories to tell afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, you have to be very careful about that. I think
fair enough. Work with crazy people. You got to watch what you say about them.
Yeah. But also, you don't want to come off as the bitch. He said she. You don't want to do things like that, and that would be a really uncomfortable atmosphere in which to work anyway.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting you brought up working with these people, and because I've seen recent pictures of you and Doug and Simon and Barbie at different conventions, and you all look genuinely happy, to be with each other. Have you stayed friends or?
Yes, absolutely. I think more. I mean, the first time that Doug, Simon, and I got together was on the 10th anniversary of Hellraiser to do. We did the first convention in Boston, and then we probably didn't see each other for about 5 years or so. And then kind of we see. I mean, it sounds terrible. We're convention friends. That's not true. We do communicate between the two. I see Barbie quite regularly in London because she's based some of the time in London. And whenever she's over here, I always make an effort to just go and have coffee with her because she's great company. I love the lady to death. And her husband, George, is a wonderful, wonderful guy as well. So we always make an effort to hang out with each other. And we usually make an effort to hang out with each other at conventions as well. And just try and catch up and so on. Having said that, I think we realised recently that it's nice to meet each other outside the convention. We went, my husband and I, Craig, a couple of years ago, drove up to see Simon and his husband, and just had an evening together in dinner when we weren't at a convention, and that was absolutely wonderful. These are really good people.
Mm-hmm. I do want to mention too, coming up is Bazaar Atlantic City, Bazaar AC, and all of you will be there, and Annabelle and I will be there, and really enjoyed the last one they had in December, and looking forward to the second one.
I was up the road at a different convention that weekend.
Oh.
So I didn't have a chance to come across and say hello. But yes, so I'm very much looking forward to that as well, and to Texas Frightmare, which is coming on next weekend.
Yes,
that's a huge one.
And the largest I've done so far was Dragon Con.
I've heard unbelievable. That's just the convention of the universe. That it's just this giant, epic, everything going on in costumes and.
I think it was 57,000 people.
Yeah.
120 guests. That was fun. I mean, it was again, Neil, what you were talking about, meeting interesting people. I got to meet Malcolm McDowell for the first time. I met David Warner, who's always been a huge hero of mine. Simply, I think there was, when I was much younger, it was always said I'd be really good casting for a young David Warner. There's something quite similar in our face. He's now got a lot more hair than I've got. He's a fascinating man. I met George Takei.
Excellent.
Oh, he's
just gorgeous.
Amazing.
Love that man. And his husband is lovely as well. Really, really nice people. Really, and we got to meet some really interesting guys at the table as well, which we always do.
His name is Brad, isn't it?
That's right, Brad. Yes.
I've heard he craps on his husband Brad about being out of shape a lot. Have you heard any of this?
Not at the time. I mean, not in front of me. I met George at his table. I queued up like I did everyone else. Oh, the other person I met there as well was Doug Jones.
Oh, nice.
The loveliest person. And I'm just completely convinced that Doug Jones is one of the loveliest people on the planet. And that the reason, apart from being extraordinarily agile, nimble, flexible, and talented, people cast him because he's just lovely. He's just such a joy to me. Genuinely a lovely, lovely, lovely guy. Dragon Con, Atlanta, huge, absolutely amazing place.
Yeah. Just real quick, because I'm also a big fan of David Warner. What are your favorite roles of his? I'm particularly fond of Time After Time.
He's been in everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. Funny enough, I watched Time After Time the other day because when I was in Los Angeles for Monsterpalooza, I got hold of a copy of it. Because they were doing this series of retrospectives with Malcolm McDowell. They showed Clockwork Orange, Time After Time, and Star Trek V, in which he's over the weeks had guest interviews.
I think that's actually 6, but it doesn't matter. Maybe 7 actually. I think
Star Trek.
It's 7 actually. 7 generations.
I'm sure I've seen it. I'm going to watch it again as well, just because I think Malcolm's a wonderful guy as well. David Warner. I watched him in Waxworks the other day. really, terrible movie.
Some terrible movies can be fun to watch.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think what I like about David Warner, he has a quality similar to Vincent Price. It doesn't matter what he's in.
Yes.
He will give it 1,000%.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked him in Time After Time. But the story about David Warner is when I was a teenager, they did a TV series called The Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
Which is obviously about the Holocaust. And he played one of the journalists. I could never bring myself to watch it. I just thought it was too distressing a subject. Mm-hmm. But I remember mates at school, or people who knew me, just saying, "God, you look really like the guy responsible for killing everybody." Right, who is this guy? I discovered it's David Warner, which is why I think I used to certainly bear a castable resemblance to David Warner. That I don't think that's ever going to happen. Yeah. So, and of course in Omen as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but just anyone who hasn't seen Time After Time, I always recommend that. It's it's an unusual movie, and I think it's really underrated.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting things. It's got some really it's of its time. Mm-hmm. But it was his first, I can't remember the director's name, but it was the director's first movie, first time director. And the opening sequence got some lovely tracking shots and how to build tension and so on. David Warner's a really interesting character. The plot twist in the middle of the movie is one of the, oh wow, this is not where I expected this to go at all. Mm-hmm. What do we do now? Some nice performances, and again, it's that stranger in a strange time thing.
Yeah,
which is you see quite I watched the first episode of Continuum TV series, and actually I didn't. I watched half of it. I couldn't take any more.
The ringing endorsement.
You can tell.
Now I'm very curious. How bad is this?
It's the 2072, and people leap back in time to escape being executed, and the cop gets dragged with them, and she ends up from 2072 in 2012. And it is that classic thing of the stranger in a strange time. Oh gosh, isn't it weird? Everything's weird and strange. You've seen it done so many times now. Mm-hmm. Every episode of Doctor Who, probably. But yeah. But no, I like that. I do like Time After Time.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
That's a good show.
I've actually done. I won't talk about Doctor Who, but.
But you haven't.
You're either. I live with a Whovian. I live with a guy who knows a lot about Doctor Who.
I have all of the Tom Baker Doctor Who's that I want Neil to watch before he sees anything else.
Oh, interesting. I had a scarf, a Tom Baker style scarf, and a fedora hat, and I used to walk around with a cane and a long coat.
That's fantastic. Did you carry jelly babies?
I didn't. I should have done.
You can now. Bring them to conventions and just hand out jelly babies to people and see who gets it. That's what we could do. A bunch of us can just start going to conventions with jelly babies and see who gets it.
See who gets it.
I'm all about jelly bellies.
Jelly babies.
Jelly babies. I was thinking jelly belly.
No. I once. This is probably a very British cultural reference. So let me tell you. Have you ever heard of a sweet called an opal fruit?
I have not.
I don't know.
No,
I know some other stuff like a Wispa bar and.
Yeah, no, this is. I think they're called spangles now, or called something else. But basically, they were square-shaped, chewy sweets that you used to get in a packet. It's called an opal fruit, and obviously they were fruit-flavored. And somebody did a series of cards by sticking jelly babies to the front of the card. Mm-hmm. And you could buy these and put them in envelopes and send them as. And it just showed a large jelly baby with a smaller jelly baby, and smaller jelly baby was saying, "When I grow up, I want to be an opal fruit." Which is just one of those. I just say, probably means a lot more if you grew up eating opal fruits as I did. But yeah, everyone should carry jelly babies.
I think so.
I think that's the moral of the story here on the show.
I think so. I think jelly babies should totally throw some money at Without Your Head now. That's a sponsor.
I'm
Yes!
totally for this idea.
Love it. We're totally going to write to jelly babies now.
Yeah, yeah.
I was interested, actually, something you just said a few minutes ago was, you couldn't watch the Holocaust series because of the subject matter, and you're someone who's, involved in the Hellraiser films, and you're a writer for horror stories. What is it, what's the difference there between not being able to watch something about the Holocaust and also writing about, horrific things?
That's very interesting. I also have difficulty with the First World War as well. I think the reason with the First World War was because of we did a show at school when I was about 17 years old called "Oh, What a Lovely War," which they revived because it's obviously the anniversary this year. It's the 100th anniversary this year, and there's a lot about the First World War going on in this country. It's difficult to persuade. Well, basically, I'm squeamish, coward, I suppose, is the bottom line. I have to watch horror movies with the lights on during the day and my finger on the fast forward button. And then I will watch the movie, and if it gets too scary, I'll fast forward, see what's going to happen, decide whether or not I can actually watch it properly or not. And I'm a Gemini. One of me is nice, one of me is nasty, and they both go into the writing of the short stories. I do get very affected by things. I'm seriously. I remember watching I get very sucked into things when I'm watching them on screen. I get totally focused, and I believe everything is real. And I was watching a trailer for a movie in a theatre once, which involved a car chase across dusty roads, and clouds of dust were coming up, and I started sneezing because the non-existent dust was getting into my nose and tickling my nose. This is what happens when I watch things. I get laser focused. I get totally tied up in these worlds.
That's an incredible imagination.
Yeah, and it's and if you put me in front of a screen that's showing a roller coaster ride, Big Dipper. Mm-hmm. So you call them roller coasters.
Yeah.
I will sway in my seat because I can physically feel everything that's going on in my mind. So I get very affected by things that I watch. And I will cry and so on, and get very upset and so on. When it comes to writing, I was trying to explain this to other. I get very upset when I have to kill somebody. I will actually try and work out if there are ways of doing it and not actually killing somebody. But really probably shouldn't have chosen horror. At the same time, I'm absolutely fascinated by the stuff. I'm working on a blog piece, a guest blog piece for Ginger Nuts of Horror, which is a really interesting, really good website run by a guy called Jim McLeod. And he's asked for blogs on the movie that made me. And the movie that made me is Roger Corman's The Mask of the Red Death, starring Vincent Price.
Yeah.
Now, this is, I think, in fact, somebody called me on this in a review. They said, reading the second volume of short stories, Other People's Darkness, is like watching an old black and white Vincent Price movie. And I thought, well, yeah, you've got all my influences. My influences are Clive Barker, Edgar Allan Poe, and a British writer called H.H. Munro, or Saki, Saki, who wrote some amazing short stories. And so my version, my font, the real horror that I enjoy are generally what one might refer to as the golden age, the early stuff. Having said that, I watched Cabin in the Woods and really thoroughly enjoyed it.
I'm a big fan of that movie as well.
Because it takes all the tropes, and it's also just really, it's intelligent.
Yeah.
It's really, it's really intelligent. I like things that present people with a moral dilemma. I'm assuming you've both watched Mask of the Red Death?
I have, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It starts off with Vincent Price playing Prince Prospero, asking a young woman to decide who's going to die, her father or her lover. And that's within the first 10 minutes of the movie. And I think that you come across my writing, it's full of moral dilemmas. And I think those are kind of what the interesting thing is. Another thing which I like about horror, because I do keep on thinking, well, if I find this stuff so difficult and so distressing, am I really working in the wrong field? And then I read stuff that doesn't have a supernatural, weird, otherworldly element about it, and I tend not to enjoy it and just not be interested in it. And the lady's name, the producer who was at this breakfast club, was saying that the thing about horror, it provides a very good backdrop to tell a very strong story. Mm. I think where it goes wrong and where I get uninterested in it, if it's stalk and slash. The first Nightmare on Elm Street movie, it's a stalk and slash movie. I really loved it. It completely terrified me. It really, really scared me.
I think there's more to it. That movie, there was a little more to it. There wasn't just a straight up slasher film. No,
precisely. And what I was trying to stumble my way towards, Neil, is basically saying it has this wonderful premise. Mm-hmm. What if the nightmare comes to life when you're asleep? You can't escape by waking up. And he's there waiting for you in the dream. That's, it's a classic. It's such a human thing and something that we can all identify with. I think it's a great movie. Apart from the scene where they obviously there's far too much blood that comes out of the bed where they've obviously turned the set.
It's certainly not a human amount of blood.
Yeah.
No.
It was several horses worth of blood. That's
great image, though. It's a great image.
It is.
It's a great image. So I think, to me, horror, the real joy of horror is, that's a very strange phrase, the real interest in horror, but the real joy of horror is because it deals with life, death, sex, and madness. There's another Vincent Price movie, which is the only movie that I remember not being able to watch until the very end when I watched it, which would have been late at night, not on DVD, but we're talking about the days when things were broadcast on live television. There were no such things as video recorders. And that's called Diary of a Madman, which I found on YouTube the other day and actually managed to watched it to the very end. I thought, oh, that's how it all ends. But it's wonderfully atmospheric, and it's this idea that there is this thing that moves from person to person, causing them to murder other people. And it's kind of hokey, but it's the way it's played, and this whole thing of don't look at the man too long because you may be next. Those are thrilling. They're interesting things. They're intelligent. They make you question. And again, the moral dilemma of if you know that the only way that you can save the people you love is by killing yourself, what do you do? So that to me is what horror is about. It's all those things I've listed.
Mm-hmm. Now, when someone actually picked up on that in a review, did you feel like, proud that someone actually could see that?
Or did I just think, oh, busted? It's very difficult, Neil. I think I've written 2 volumes of short stories now. As I say, I was at this masterclass yesterday on writing. And the first exercise was, why do you write? And you had to write, I write because. Mm-hmm. I haven't got the notes to hand, so I can't quote it exactly, but basically I said, I write because I love the telling of stories, and for the mystery that each person hears a different tale. What always amazes me, if I hand somebody a volume of 7 short stories in the case of the first book, or 5 in the next one, in the most recent one, they will choose a different story as the one that touched them most deeply. Yes, this person kind of called me on it, and I cheerfully acknowledge that this is how I got into horror, is by watching Roger Corman, Edgar Allan Poe, Vincent Price movies. And Vincent Price is just a masterful actor as far as I'm concerned. And so kind of busted, but also, that's just one person's view, and I know somebody else will pick a completely different story. Often, and I always feel, if it's a story you've particularly struggled with, this Too Solid Flesh in the second volume, when I presented it to my editor, she was really nice, she was really gentle, but basically what she was saying was, you have to rewrite it. There's a good story in there somewhere, but not at the moment. And at that stage, it was 10,000 words.
Wow.
So I had to go back and I had to rewrite it again. And somebody was saying how much it really affected them. And I think that is the part of the joy of stories. When we are, for us as human beings, everyone has got their own story. We all tell stories. And when you tell a story, different parts of it will touch different people, because it's obviously what's happened to you in your life. Every reader brings their own life to every story they read, and therefore they will see a different story to the person next to them.
Just like any work of art, I think you see in it, something that touches you personally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If it's good.
Yeah.
If it's great, it's got, I suppose, I don't know if this is true or not, but I think if it's great art, then it's got something in there, a truth in there for everybody. It will touch them somehow. It touches everybody somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, do let everyone know. Your website's nicholasvince.com. We'll have the link on the website. And you just mentioned the new book is out, Other People's Darkness, and you can get that on Amazon. And can you get it off your website?
You can get signed copies off my website.
No, even better.
In fact, down to... Very good question, actually. I'm leaning over and looking at my stock of books. Right. Actually, you can get signed copies of the first book. You won't be able to get signed copies of the second book because I've just run out of stock, and I'm getting some more stock when I go across to the States next week. But yeah, you can get signed copies off the website.
Yeah, very cool. Or if you meet you in person at a convention, then you can get it.
Yes, I'll at both Atlantic City and we'll have. I've got copies for people to buy and sign and so on, and I'm also running a photo competition.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. I quite like this competition, if you'd like to explain it.
Sure. I mean, basically the idea is that what I'm asking people to do is to take a photograph featuring themselves or their friends and the copy of What Monsters Do. Other People's Darkness, the second part of the book, Other People's Darkness. And we've had 10 entries so far, all of which are taking a slightly different tack on it, and that's what I'm looking for. Basically, there are going to be prizes of signed copies of the book and a photograph, or a Amazon $20 voucher for those people who've bought copies or already got signed copies. And the idea is that I'm going to get those together and I'm going to put them into a promo of the book. Everyone does book trailers these days for their book, and I just wanted to do something different.
Yeah.
And what I'm always touched by and amazed by and delighted by is the fact that the people who tend to read, the fans of Hellraiser and the fans on Nicholas Vince, the fan page on Facebook, are just a really talented, interesting people. I had friends on there who are writers and artists and so on. So I just wanted to kind of honour that, but also just do something different with a book trailer and having lots of people, different faces, holding up the book or with the book, somehow featuring the book cover. Oh, and it's definitely no purchase necessary. I'm quite happy for you to download a sample onto your Kindle or print out a copy of the front of the book, and paste it to a piece of card and just hold that up. But as long as it's got the cover of the book and it's got a person's face in it, I'm happy. That's basically the rules. There's a few more rules in there as well, but you can find all that out on the website.
Don't steal it from the bookstore.
No, please don't steal it. Funnily enough, one of the rules says, please do not commit anything illegal. Because I was looking, when you set up all these things, you think, I'm going to have to really think about it. So I did go through it, and I thought, yeah, that's probably a really good clause to put in the rules. Don't do anything either dangerous or illegal. The secretary and I will disavow any knowledge of your actions.
It's interesting because when I saw that that you'd put up the event on Facebook, that people have their electronic copies and that they're still posting themselves with the Kindle next to them or whatever it is.
Absolutely. So that's very, very cool as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, people are clever about what they need to do to make it work.
No, absolutely. And I think that's part of the fun because I'm offering a prize and there's going to be one randomly drawn prize. So everybody has a chance of winning one of the prizes, but I've also got another couple of prizes. One is for the most imaginative, which includes the most humorous, and the one, and also the most sinister as well. And I've already there are a couple of interesting entries in there. People, this is a chance, but a chance for people to have fun. As far as I'm concerned. So I'm really looking, as I was saying, we've got 10 entries in so far, all of which are very interesting. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of those coming in. But I think it should be very good fun.
When you put together an anthology of short stories, do you is there anything where you want them to connect somehow, have a similar theme, or in the order you put them in?
That's very interesting. When I did the first one, I definitely came up with the title "What Monsters Do." Searched for it on Amazon, and discovered nobody else had ever used the title. And I thought, great, I'll go with that because that has, And when I thought of that, I also thought of that phrase of "It is not our flesh, but our acts which make us monsters." And I thought that's what I really want to write about, and that's obviously massively influenced by working on Nightbreed, working with Clive, and also my story of growing up with a different face, more or less, until I was 19 when I had a major operation on my face. I had a very pronounced chin when I was a kid, so I've always been fascinated by people's looks and so on. So the first volume, there was very definitely, this is going to be about monsters. When it came to the second volume, I started with just thinking up stories, and I thought, there isn't actually a theme here. Okay, I'm now going to definitely write a book that is called Other People's Darkness and Other Stories, because I'm getting lots of different ideas all the time. And in fact, there are stories that I started writing for the first book, which kind of didn't quite work out. They're still sitting there. I may well come back to them again, and they'll probably appear in the third volume, which, funny enough, is the thing that I'm working on now, along with putting together ideas for the first novel. I think the first one, definitely it was a themed anthology. The next one, I wanted a lot more freedom. In terms of the order in which the stories are based in the book, it's one of those arbitrary things. You kind of look at it and think, well, is this one does this one have similar themes to the next one if I'm reading them in order? But there again, I'm kind of confident. I don't know about yourselves, and you can answer this question. Do you guys read anthologies of short stories?
That's something we talk about a lot on the show. I like anthologies in general. I always like films that are put together like that, like built Tales from the Crypt and Creep Show.
Sure. Mm-hmm. And when you pick up a book of anthologies, do you always read the short ones first?
I think I go for a title that might grab my interest.
Yeah, I've always read the shortest one first.
That's probably smart.
Yeah, I think I would be in that category because you think it's less time to commit.
Yeah, and also just kind of, I think it particularly if it's like my anthologies are obviously all by the same author. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, well, may not be I'm not going to read the first one in the book. I'm going to read the shortest one to see if it's worth my time. Do I like this short story? Oh, okay, that one's good. All right, I'll try some of the others. I think is there. So I kind of suspect people don't read things, or and if you're picking up an anthology that's got lots of authors in, like Demonologia Biblica, it's got 26 stories by 26 different authors in it. You're going to read the ones by your favorite author first.
Yeah, or names you might recognize. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So yeah, and it becomes down. But to be honest, in the days of Kindle, it comes down to I'm people get the 15% of the book downloadable. And if you're putting, and this was a real concern when I did What Monsters Do, I had to make sure that the first story was more than 15% of the total volume. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I was giving away a completely free short story.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a consideration now when you're doing anthologies as to the one you put first. Do you? And I think there's arguments for both ways of doing it. Mm-hmm. But you kind of want to leave people with an enticement. Because if you download a novel, you don't expect to get the entire novel free as part of your sample. So I think it's fair enough to say, okay, well, if I'm doing an anthology, I'm going to give you most of the story, but I'm not going to give you the punchline.
I actually noticed that on Amazon when they have that you bring it up, because I did see that there was a lot of the story there, but it doesn't finish off. And I did read the whole book, but it was interesting that you have, like you said, you have so much there already on Amazon, and if you had a shorter one there and you gave away the whole thing, someone might read that and think, well, I've got a whole story here, I might not want to buy it. But if you leave them wanting some, then they're going to be more interested in buying it, so they can at least read the ending of that one.
Yeah, no, you could. I was out yesterday evening with the at the Word Factory. And there were three readers there, like authors, who read their complete short story, but the third one just read an extract from her short story. And the first thing I did was go out and buy her book, because it's like, I want to know what happened. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have to say, it was a lady called A.L. Kennedy, and she was just one of the funniest people I've watched in ages, but who also, I think, from the reading her story, probably has a quite dark side as well, a dark, interesting side. But I've got this volume of short stories by A.L. Kennedy now, which I'm really looking forward to read.
Yeah, you mentioned that to us off air. If you just want to go over exactly what that event was, and do you kind of feel that's kind of like the modern day version of people around like a fire and then telling stories to each other?
That's a very astute comment, Neil. That's very interesting. As I say, the event I went to yesterday was called Word Factory. It's organised by Word Factory, and basically in the centre of London, I think it must be the largest bookstore we have in London now. It's Waterstones in Piccadilly, which is 4 stories plus a basement, so 5 stories in total, all books. And in the afternoon, I did a masterclass with a guy called Nicholas Royal, who edits the best of British short stories each year, and from Salt Publications, I think, off the top of my head. Yeah, from Salt. That was really interesting. As I alluded to the exercise that we did of why do I love? Why do I write? Mm-hmm. The next exercise he did was he gave us 12 first lines, because the workshop was on how to start a story. And he gave us the 12 first lines from short stories, and we examined them in groups, and then and decided what makes a really good first line. I don't have them to hand, but one of the ones that I liked, there was one that was, "I hate February." I thought, no, I don't think much of that. That's not interesting.
Yeah, that's my birthday month, so yeah.
Is it? I wouldn't take it personally.
No.
The other one was another one of them was it was the morning on which I was to be on the day on which I was to be slaughtered, and I went, ooh. And the thing, what we decided was, and myself and my partner, what we decided was that a good first line prompts a question. It may not ask a question, but it prompts a question. Like, what do you mean? It's the day on which you're going to be slaughtered? What are you, a lamb? And then basically we were given half an hour to write a short story. And I'm going to be writing up the short story that I wrote yesterday afternoon in half an hour. And it was an extraordinary experience because we then... And one woman wrote enough of a short story to practically have me in tears. It was very moving, again, quite distressing. It was a distressing subject. So just by having had one line, and the idea obviously was that if you use that one line to kick it off, actually, if you took that one line away, in other words, take away the copyright material, and just used your second line, it would probably still work. And part of the exercise was knowing that once you've written your first line, you'll probably come back and change your first line on the story as well. And it was all about the craft of writing, and it was really, really fascinating. Really fascinating. And as I say, I discovered as I walked in that Nicholas Royal remembered me from the 1980s when we'd done a convention together. And we'd both been published in Fear magazine, which I alluded to earlier on in the answer to Look See. So it was very, very inspiring. And then in the evening, we got 3 short stories read to us by the authors. And then we did a question and answer with A.L. Kennedy, a lady who I'd not heard before, and never read before and not heard of, but who turned out to be an absolutely fascinating woman. Really, really interesting author.
How important is this community of authors and the writing experience to you now in your life? Is it something that you ever thought you'd be a part of? Did you ever?
Oh gosh, that's a really telling question. And I'm afraid it's going to have to be our last question because I have to go out and do my dinner date this evening. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a very good question. If you, unless you have another question that you really want to ask me, it's the last one. Nope. Okay, let's look at my history. I met this guy called Clive Barker, who was on dole at the time. In other words, he was unemployed and living off the state. Mm-hmm. Fairly soon thereafter, and I knew he was a playwright because one of my mates, Simon Bamford, who I was at drama school with, had done plays with him with the Dog Company, and I'd seen a couple of Clive's plays. And then Clive asked me to model for him, and the stuff that I modelled for ended up on being the covers of the Books of Blood, which were an edition that he did. So I met Clive. Knew Clive very well. He had a mate called Neil Gaiman. Mm-hmm. So I used to hang out with Clive Barker and Neil Gaiman. They knew a comic artist called John Bolton, you may come across. And basically I hung out with these extraordinarily talented people. And I have to say at the time, I thought, I'm just never going to be as good as these guys. I really just thought, no, I just don't, these guys are just awe-inspiring. And I kind of left the field and went into computers. Years, and then 2 years later, 16 years later, a couple of years ago, I come back to it and I meet up with, I've been in touch with Clive over the years, not with Neil. I met Neil again in October of last year, and he was just so delightful and so complimentary about me and said, oh, but you wrote the most interesting interview that I think I've ever had. because I wrote a series of interviews for a magazine called Skeleton Crew called The Luggage in the Crypt.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I was asking authors, people like Joe Lansdale, Clive Barker, Ramsey Campbell, Neil Gaiman, well, what would you take into the afterlife with you? A bit like, what food? It's essentially asking you what your favourite food is and what your favourite books are and what music inspires you, etc. Which I think was basically my cunning way of saying, where do you get your ideas from?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really. I think that I've got Facebook friends who are authors. There are a lot of those. Some of whom are extremely talented. I have, it sounds a terrible thing to say, and people are going to hate me. Not everybody is. Some of them are very, very talented, and I think the important point I want to make is it's important to hang out with very talented people. I think that's a very good method of growing your own talent. Seek out talented people because they will help you and nurture you. Even if they never critique your work, if they never, as I say, Clive, one of the most important people in my life, mostly because of all the very good advice that he gave me. And one of the pieces of very good advice was he said, seek out good teachers. And with Nicholas Royal yesterday, but everybody else in the class. I mean, we were sitting there with the people who run the Word Factory. They've been doing this for a couple of years. And they were saying that, wow, this is a real talented bunch of people. And there are about 12, 15 of us in the room. And I know, because one can tell when people are bullshitting you and just being nice. When they said, that was extraordinary, the level of everyone who happened to be there yesterday afternoon was very good and very high, and there was a lot of talent in that room. So I think you're absolutely right, Annabelle. It is important to me. And one of the great joys of the dinner date I'm on with this evening is that I'm really fascinated with the work that Dawson James is doing. And I can't wait to hear about that tonight. When you meet talented people, little fireworks go off in your mind and you start having your own ideas. And it's the same when you watch a really good TV series, House of Cards on Netflix.
Oh, that's a fantastic show.
From the title sequence in, everyone who worked on that is really, really talented.
Yeah.
They've got that magic spark. And when you see something like that, it's an extraordinary experience, and it really does inspire you, after watching those things. And it's the same when you read Clive Barker, Joe Lansdale, Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman's described this. He said, books are a form of telepathy. You understand his thoughts even though he's not there, and it's a different time. But you understand what's going on in his mind, or you can understand what's going on in his mind because it's there on the piece of paper. So books are a form of telepathy in that. So, and I think whenever I was thinking about this today, the reason why I bought A.L. Kennedy's book of short stories is because she's just incredibly talented. She doesn't write horror. I think some of the stuff and I haven't had a chance to read them all yet, there's going to be some sort of darkness there. And the other stuff I read, I do my best. I read talented, storytellers, and I will. You've got a page from me. It used to be about 2 paragraphs. The only way you could get books was to walk into a bookshop. I'd pick up a book, never look at the blurb on the back. That always contains spoilers. And I'd open up the book and I'd look at the first page, and if you had me in the first 2 paragraphs, I'd probably read your book. And I think you seek that stuff out. You must find talented people, and you don't actually have to meet them. You don't actually have to get them to critique your work, because, frankly, they should be writing. Having said that, that's one view. There is another view, and it's very important. I was very impressed that A.L. Kennedy and does Nick Royal, they both teach. They both teach creative writing. And I would love it, in about 10, 15 years, when I think I might have become a really good writer, I would love to be able to share that and teach other people. And so on. But I think that, there is a huge community of writers, and I think getting together with a writing group and sharing your stories, it's terrifying. I wrote a short story in half an hour, and if you're given that kind of challenge, you have to write from your heart. You've got to be brave. And what I wrote was from a dark part of my heart. It was very effective. People were really complimentary, but it was terrifying. To share something so raw, and this is first drafts you're sharing. I never show anybody my stuff until it's like 4 or 5 drafts in, and my editor doesn't get to see it until I'm about 4 or 5 drafts in. So I think it's a brave thing to do, but I think it's an extremely good thing. I want to go back next month. I want to go and do another.
At that particular, did you also read it in front of them?
Yes. Yeah, that was it. We wrote it, and literally we all shared our short stories. And they might have been short stories, or they might have been scenes, or they might have just been beginnings. There was, you didn't have to write a complete short story. Yeah.
I would assume that would be completely different too than actually sending it to someone and they're reading in their own time. You're not actually there. You're not.
Yeah, you've got that, and then of course it also becomes partly performance as well, which gives you another. I mean, one lady. Gosh, and I don't blame her. It was so emotional because it was obviously so close to her heart, and it was about child abuse. And we're all practically sitting there in tears and just going, "Oh, God!" And then we all burst into rapturous applause. And I thought, well, you had to applaud because somehow he had to break it to get away from the world that and what she was describing.
Wake yourself back up and come to present day. We're not there anymore. Now we're here.
Yeah. I mean, that's seeded. I won't. She wrote some extraordinary passages. And those images will stay with you. And that's part of that's part of the way that that you've read something good if you're still haunted by it 2 or 3 days later. If you're still thinking, which is one of the nicest things that one of the reviewers said of Other People's Darkness, that stories will make you cry and stay with you. That's what we all want to do. We all want to write stories, we being authors, creators, anything, actors, all creators. We want to write things or create things that stay with people.
Very well put. And I want to really thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for waiting for me.
Absolutely.
I didn't quite get the timing right.
Oh.
This has been really good fun.
Yeah, I've really
It's been
enjoyed
fantastic
it.
talking with you.
I think
it really
we both
has.
Yeah, we would love to have you back sometime.
Oh, my pleasure. And I look forward to meeting you guys in Atlantic City.
Yeah.
Are you going to be recording interviews when you come round to Atlantic City?
Yes,
absolutely.
Definitely.
Cool.
Now that means we're going to get one with you now.
Oh, yeah. God, yeah. Right. Well, it's just been, as you might have gathered from the amount of time I've just spoken, I enjoy talking to people.
Yeah.
We enjoy listening to people.
Yes.
It works out very nicely. So we will talk and listen very soon.
Okay. Cool. Lovely to meet you guys.
You too.
Great to meet you as well. Thanks so much.
That's my pleasure. Take care, guys. Have a good evening.
You as
Thanks,
well.
you too.
Enjoy your dinner date.
I will do. Cheers. Bye.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Mark Blackie of Disappointed Virginity. You're listening to Without Your Head.